The United Nations Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, is calling on the international community to support the humanitarian policy of the Borno state government to help return people left in internally displaced camps back to their homes. Guterres made the call during a courtesy visit to Borno state as part of his two-day visit to Nigeria. He says the people need housing support, real development of schools and hospitals, and empowerment to return to their businesses of fishing and farming. The UN scribe was in company of Governor Professor Babagana Zulum and other leaders.
This visit was supposed to take place last week. Unfortunately, I had to go to Moscow and Kyiv, as you know. But it was a visit of solidarity, especially with the victims of terrorism in the holy months of Ramadan. And the fact that I came to Borno State is symbolic of our priority in the world to fight terrorism and to create solutions for the victims of terrorism. Now, the Borno State I've heard about in many circumstances around my life as a High Commissioner for Refugees and then as Secretary General was a Borno State of terrorism, of violence, of displacement, of despair. This is not the Borno that I found today. The Borno I found today is a Borno of hope, is a Borno with future. And I was very impressed to see the policy that is being applied here, recognizing that you don't fight terrorism just by military means, you fight terrorism addressing the root causes of terrorism. And the policy of the governor, which is aiming at reestablishing fully the confidence between the people and the government, is an essential element that I could witness today being implemented in reality. And on the other hand, it is absolutely essential to understand that in a situation like this, it's not enough to provide humanitarian assistance. And I'm grateful to all those in the international community that have supported the people of Borno with humanitarian assistance. But the people I met today want more than that. The people I met today in the IDP camp want to go back home in safety and dignity. And when one looks at the state, one understands that the way to address terrorism effectively is to provide not only hope, but a future of reality, is to invest in livelihoods, is to invest in the reintegration of those that have been in the past recruited by these terrorist groups, by Boko Haram. I was amazed to see today in a center those that had been terrorists. They want to integrate in the society and contribute to the society. And the policy that is in place here is a policy of reconciliation, is a policy of reintegration, and is a policy aiming at a development perspective to allow for terrorism to be definitely eliminated. The fact that the people is able to construct their own future in confidence with those that are governing them.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, while still in Nigeria's troubled northeast state of Borno, met families of those affected by the Boko Haram conflict ravaging the region for more than 12 years. The United Nations Information Center in Nigeria says the Secretary-General will also evaluate the impact of climate change on vulnerable communities and assess progress made as well as the challenges to the COVID-19 recovery. It is the first visit by the UN Secretary-General to Nigeria since his appointment. The visit is part of his annual Ramadan Solidarity visit to nations. But this year, Guterres is focusing on countries affected by terrorism and also highlighting the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war on the African continent. Before arriving in Nigeria, Guterres already visited Senegal and Niger. A lot to talk about this morning, Tundu.
Well, what I appreciated the most from his address was the emphasis on hope. And that's extremely important. I recall the first time personally that I heard of Boko Haram attacks was 12 years ago. And it didn't seem at that time that there was any light at the end of the tunnel. So it does appear that we're heading in the right direction. Progress has been made. Although we cannot say we've won this particular war until every single person in those IDP camps has returned home. That's not where those people belong. They're supposed to just stay there for a short time. When they're safe, then they can return. The fact that they're there shows that a glaring problem still exists, which Mr. Guterres also highlighted, talking about addressing the root causes of terrorism, which really underlying everything is poverty and climate change because of the Chad Basin driving this kind of rampant criminality that we're seeing, this desperation that people are exhibiting. But he did say something I found could be controversial, talking about reintegrating repentant Boko Haram fighters. Is there such a thing as a repentant Boko Haram fighter? The jury is still out on that. I've tried to do a lot of research into de-radicalization programs across the world, and I have to say an asterisk still remains. They just cannot be trusted. So, but what do we do in practical terms? Do you throw the entire person away, lock them up, throw away the key? What actually happens? I don't have the answers, but this idea that they can be reintegrated after the heinous, monstrous crimes that they have committed will always give me pause.
About you?
Well, I think that the Ramadan visit of the United Nations Secretary General to 3 countries in West Africa is a very good confidence-building initiative. He's been to Senegal, he's been to Niger, and this is his first visit to Nigeria. And choosing to go to Borno State, which had been a theater of war and strife and confusion, and to deliver on that occasion a message of hope is something, I guess, that will encourage these Nigerian authorities, and particularly the state government and other stakeholders who have been trying to battle the challenge of terrorism. He says that the Borno State that he used to hear about in his position as UN Commissioner for Refugees was a Borno State of strife, of destruction, of terrorism. But at the Borno State that he has seen in the course of his visit, I think that there is hope and that the situation is not as bad. And he commended Professor Zulum, where Professor Zulum, has also shown, indeed, a lot of commitment, a lot of leadership. He has not adopted the option of some other governors in other parts of Nigeria who just focus on lamentation. And even here in Nigeria, many persons have had cause to commend them. The UN Secretary General, it was also important that he said he will be Professor Zulum's ambassador, his advocate within the international community, to see how support can be mobilized from the international community to assist the people of Borno State, to make sure that, places where there is peace now, that the peace that has been achieved is longer lasting. But when he talked about the people, I think he spoke more about deepening trust between the people and government. And I think that that is very important. 2, he talked about investing in the people. And in that regard, he said the UN will assist to see opportunities in terms of creating jobs, building infrastructure. That is important. And the persons that are in the internally displaced camps, he said, look, their expectation is that they will be able to return to their homes. Now, those internally displaced persons camps are not necessarily in the best of conditions. And when he made a point that humanitarian assistance is not enough, long term, these people will want to return to their normal lives. And I think that that will be the expectation, because that's when you will now see concrete evidence of the fact that these persons, they've been able to go back to their homes. And it was in that context, if I recall correctly, that he was talking about reconciliation, reintegration, because the people's lives, have been terribly disrupted. And he praised the Nigerian government of not just adopting military means. And that's what the Nigerian government itself talks about, that they will adopt both kinetic and non-kinetic measures. However, very good outing. He will be meeting with the president of Nigeria. And don't forget also, the UN Secretary General is a diplomat. I do not imagine that they will have allowed the UN Secretary General to visit other centers of disruption in Nigeria, because security is a big problem in Nigeria. And I hope, someone will brief the UN Secretary General appropriately all the suggestions that he has given, yes, they are perfectly in order. But the point is about policy. Because the bigger problem we have in Nigeria is inconsistency with policy. We blow cool today, tomorrow we blow hot, and we don't do enough follow-through. But I guess with the kind of international support and solidarity, which is a phrase that the UN Secretary General used, I think that the policymakers, the policy executors will be encouraged to do more. Because as we prepare for the 2023 general elections, we need nothing more than stability in the country and enough confidence on the part of the people that they are safe in every part of Nigeria to be able to come out and take a decision about their own future as Nigeria goes through the transition that is ahead.
Well, Rufai, he specifically referred to those reintegrating those who had previously been recruited by Boko Haram. That's how he put it. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, Tundu, I've tried to read every literature possible. It doesn't work. And let's not deceive ourselves. It doesn't work. The format that works is you beat them up into submission, then you pick them up from there. When you look at the case of the Russo Brigado in Italy, the Red Brigade, Badamaidov, and the likes, it doesn't work. Even if you look at the likes of ETA, Escodita, Sakatasuna, it doesn't work. So you can't say you reintegrate them just like that. It won't work. You have to fight the war, complete it militarily, then use soft measures like economic empowerment, emancipation, which we know that there are problems on ground. Because prior to this, when you keep looking at the economic indices of the North, you would see that poverty reigned supreme and all of these things were preparatory ground for the recruitment of those bandits. And also another part is the destabilization of the societal and family structure of the North. Communities now live in distrust because of the effects of Boko Haram and banditry. The gory effect of some children being told to kill their fathers. We all saw those stories. So it's deeper than, yeah, I see hope in Borno, don't get me wrong. Give it to President Babagana Zulum. He's done a lot. Governor Babagana Zulum, he's done a lot. He's helped with infrastructural development, schools and everything. He's done a yeoman's job, and people love him for that. But you see, it's deeper than that. This job of reintegration will last another 20, 30, 40 years because you need to start building those strands of society and fabric of society. And those are the intangible things. Those things are not building of schools. It's about building of trust for people to be able to go back to school. Using education as a means of economic empowerment. I met a lovely girl that was part of the girls that broke the record for the longest reading session, the Guinness Book of World Record. And she said she's a graduate. She's an orphan. She's a graduate of University of Maiduguri. She did physics. But her passion is to go back and empower girls to be able to help them go to school. And she told me something that I always keep in my head every day. She says, Mr. Rufai, guns will kill terrorists, but education will kill terrorism. So things like that, using that as a launchpad to build society all again, I think this would be the focus of the United Nations here. And like you said, they are diplomats. And, you know, he's quite seasoned, Antonio Gutierrez. Started his career as a professor of telecoms in Portugal, finally became the Prime Minister of Portugal. At some point was the president of Socialists International, the group of socialists around the world. So he comes prepared for the job. And he's got his job cut out. So these are the things we expect him to do along the diplomatic lines for us. Help us get the necessary prerequisite, rehabilitation kind of funding that'll help heal those societies. And that'll also help us be able to connect that very tedious link between infrastructure and the intricacy and the fine details of the societal nuances that have been missing because of this Boko Haram insurgency. Because you see, one other thing we fail to realize is that society has been lost in areas like Borno and some other parts where insurgency has taken over communities and villages. And that's even a longer walk. But good outing, We're happy there's going to be an advocate and an ambassador for Nigeria. We're happy that hope is being restored, and truly hope is being restored to Borno. But the question is, there are other theaters. It's moved to other parts of the country. And if we can't solve those problems, then we are not there yet. Now to Delta State. Deputy Senate President and All Progressive Congress governorship aspirant says Electoral Act, which was enabled by the National Assembly, was duly assented to by President Muhammadu Buhari. Speaking in Ughelli North, he called on the public to disregard the misinformation making the rounds that he wrote the Electoral Act. Jemima Boloko has the report.
Speaking at a consultative meeting with supporters in Ughelli North of Delta State, Omo-Agege says the people have been misinformed about the amended electoral bill recently signed into law by President Muhammadu Buhari. The Deputy Senate President says he cannot have single-handedly written the bill as it is being claimed on social media.
Because going forward, we are not going to sit down and allow the state government to use the instrumentality of the Nigerian police to intimidate our people. And I made it clear that, yes, they may wield power here at the state level, that we are also available to checkmate the activities, in Abuja. That was the thrust of the remarks that I made there, but I also understand that there's been some misinformation and misconstruction of those remarks, most especially to the extent that I of Omo-Agege claimed the authorship of the new Electoral Act. So people should take a deep breath, not lose their sense of humor. No one person alone writes a bill and passes a bill in the National Assembly.
Omo-Agege says the introduction of a bimodal system of voting will bring transparency and ensure a fair and credible electoral process for the 2023 forthcoming general elections.
We understand that, yes, when the first Electoral Act was promulgated in 2010, it was good law. And it was written and passed with the best of intentions, but in the implementation of the act, so many imperfections and so many mischiefs, reared their heads. And ever since, we've been fighting and battling on how to address those mischiefs, taking into account that the law is organic. As in the course of the implementation, you find out about the loopholes, the lacunas that you need to address. And one of that is it's the introduction of technology, to address those toxic votes, that emanate from different places.
Omo-Agege also explained his take on the controversial Section 8412 of the Electoral Act, which had been nullified by a federal high court in Umuahia, Abia State capital, but it is currently being challenged on appeal by the National Assembly. This particular section of the Electoral Act states that no political appointees at any level shall be voting, delegate or be voted for at the convention or congress of any political party for the nomination of candidates for any election.
It's now up to the courts, to exercising their Section 6 powers of the Constitution on judicial review to decide whether or not this section stays or should be deleted. So there's not a chance in the world I will claim authorship of Section 8412 when I'm opposed to Section 8412.
Omo-Agege says in supporting the electoral bill, his intentions is for all Nigerians to benefit from the electoral processes as the 2023 forthcoming general election draws near.
He's a man for the people, a man who has the right policies and the right manifesto to emancipate Delta State from the shackles of poverty and bondage that PDP has kept us under in the last 23 years.
Jemima Boloko, Arise News.
Right, Tundu? He said he didn't say that.
Except he did in that undated video. He said that he wrote it because he knows how Delta State politics is. But I agree with him there because you'll recall I didn't take it seriously at all.
Yeah.
I just think it's the usual sort of political self-aggrandizing hyperbole that people tend to do, you know, this grandstanding. And he referred to people should have a sense of humor. I quite agree. People should also have a healthy dose of skepticism, take everything with a pinch of salt, and not major in the minor. The real issue with his campaign, I imagine, is what exactly does he have to offer the people of Delta State? But no, he said it. He did.
That's it.
Well, it's always very easy when people, commit a gaffe in the public domain to blame the messenger and say that they've been quoted out of context or, people have been misinformed. But the good thing, of course, is that he himself has realized his mistake. Because when that story was carried publicly, it was a video. He spoke in pidgin. Well, he said, "Nami right arm." And we had, cause to say, no, it's not about you. This is about Nigeria, and that bill went through a process. Even if he and Abubakar Kyari, were the two senators who originally proposed the bill to amend the Electoral Act number 6 of 2010, Amendment Process Alteration 6. In any case, it's good that he has backtracked, but he should also learn a lesson from this. And other political leaders should also learn lessons from it. That when you're on the campaign trail or you think you are relating with communities or your constituents, don't get carried away. Don't say what you will not be able to defend when you are taken to task. That, for me, is a lesson. But now he has rearranged his thoughts, and it seems to be a good thing that again has been put on record in the public domain. But let him be careful going forward.
I mean, politicians will say everything when they're stomping. I think Mario Cuomo puts it succinctly that we campaign in poetry and govern in prose. So for him, this is the prose of campaign. But for the fact out there, he said it, wrote it. And by just some imagination, if my memory serves me right, I think he voted against electoral transitional results.
Was he one of those?
Yeah, he was one. I think he was one of those. If my memory serves me right. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Yeah, but we don't keep proper record of how our lawmakers
voted.
As is the case elsewhere in the world.
But I think he was one of those that first kicked against, electoral transmission. So that's in the spirit of Nami right time or not. But most importantly, like both of you said, it's important that he has come out to say, I didn't write it. It's, the president has centered to it most importantly, and that's it. So that's all the news headline. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll have Rotus, Michael, Aaron to give us updates on Africa, global business, and sporting activities across the globe. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning. There's still the Labour Day or Labour holidays actually applying in China and mainland China and Japan. So basically it's down to Hong Kong, which has added to losses, really. I mean, the bottom line is that everybody is waiting for this Fed decision about interest rates today. And that's really the only game in town as far as the markets are concerned. Basically, the Hang Seng down 1.1, Tencent, Alibaba declining 2. Chinese refineries are apparently buying Russian oil at steep discounts. It's adding to this general narrative that it will be China that takes up the slack from Russia if the US and the UK, they've already banned Russian oil. The EU, which I'll come on to, is still debating it, but it looks like the bloc probably will. Starbucks, we turn our attention to them mainly because they're a big consumer stock, and they've actually suspended their outlook as far as China's concerned because of all the lockdowns. They've got no idea which way that's going to go. Sales actually doing quite well in China, but as I say, the company is not looking forward with any particular focus because they just don't know what's going to happen. Russia has apparently, and I say apparently, dodged what would have been an historic default to shareholders. They originally said they wanted to pay off their sovereign debt interests in rubles. that changed. There was a U-turn there, the finance ministry U-turn there, and apparently some of it's been paid. It's now resting with Citigroup in London, over $400 million worth of it. Whether it's actually today is the breakdown day, when the deadline day, when it actually has to happen. Whether it's actually going to the recipients or not, whether it's gone to them, I do not know the answer to that question, and nor does anybody else right now. But anyway, it looks like the crisis has been averted, but it has actually cut away at a large part of their foreign reserves. Although it has to be said that their bank governor, the central bank governor, the woman who's been in power, she was going to resign, but Putin persuaded her to stay, and she's done a very, very good job of keeping the level of the ruble up. And so, and if you remember, she increased interest rates to 20% on the day of the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. India's largest IPO. Now, here's a good one. We like the fact that India is emerging as this huge economy, and it's called the Life Insurance Corporation. Apart from banks, it attracts the largest amount of savers in the country. It's a beginning of a sort of privatization process. It's now got 19.5% of the nation's savings resting with it. So it's actually a big deal. Whether it'll actually work or not, well, it's all about investors, really. So basically, let's turn our attention now to the United States, and we're going to hear whether or not, and the betting is that there will be an interest rate rise. The question is how much, and how will the balance sheet of the Fed be reduced also to go along with this tightening. What were people actually buying yesterday? Well, they were buying energy stocks, obviously. They were buying heavily into defensive sectors like healthcare and utilities. All those performed on the main indexes on Wall Street, and it comes after relative declines, and for the first time it does seem as though sellers are actually slightly exhausted by what's going on and not wanting to miss out, so they've been altering their attention to buying. Now, the European Commission, it's considering, now again, this is very much a moving story, but it looks as though there will be a gradual decrease in energy coming from Russia as far as EU states are concerned. Apparently, and I'm only saying apparently because it is a breaking story, that sanctions will get firmer and firmer over the next 6 months. So by 6 months' time, there will be none of those. However, a couple of states, as we've already said, have actually said that Slovakia and Hungary are wanting exemptions from that, since they are so highly dependent on Russian energy. Again, it's very, very complicated to push this through a block of 27 differing economies, as everybody's experience of trying to put a one-size-fits-all policy over lots of different economies will be finding out. But the EU's trying. Now to the UK, and we've been talking for, it seems like, months now about the cost of living increase. Energy firms are facing a probe into the way they've actually applied direct debits. If you pay a direct debit, you're sort of giving them money come what may to the company, and therefore it is a way of doing it so that you actually pay less and so on. But I think there's been a degree of overcharging here, so there's going to be a probe about that coming up. UK, the MPC, Bank of England meeting starts today, result tomorrow about interest rates. Likely there will be a rise there too. How to ward off stagflation, of course, is the big issue. It's households which are under threat as the cost of living rises, as it does in most of the economies, and money's coming straight out of households' disposable income, and the consumer spending has fallen the most since most in 50 years. UK as well, BP profits are soaring. Talking about this yesterday on the channel, but there are further calls now, particularly from the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, that there should be a windfall tax on companies like BP. BP, for its part, is saying that it's buying back another $2.5 billion worth of its shares. It pays expects to pay £1 billion in taxes over 2022 over North Sea oil and the rest of it. So that debate is actually continuing. Will a windfall tax happen? Well, once you've done it, you can't do it again. That's the only problem. Commodities, oil, we were talking about BP. Oil is basically going a little bit sideways at the moment, but there are some big things to come. The US Gulf of Mexico has seen a burst of drilling activity. I mentioned these in no particular order. Shale drillers have focused on investor returns, and a heat wave in India is going to put a lot of demand for aircon systems there. So it's unprecedented levels of oil demand coming from India. And natural gas, finally, up 9%, its highest level since 2008, unsurprising there. And the problem about natural gas is, of course, that you need to degas it and then regas it, and because of it, there aren't the pipelines there. So there's plenty of hunger for gas around the world, and plenty of places that will supply, but are the pipelines in place? Suspect they aren't. That's the global view.
Right, Michael? Real quickly, I'd like to talk about Australia. Australia bopped up their interest rate yesterday. A lot of people say it's because of the forthcoming elections in Australia. How do you think the Fed will react to that? Because a lot of people feel the Fed is quite too slow as regards bopping up interest rate. That's what. Number two will be about the insurance payout, not insurance payout, I should say, insurance pot in the UK. There's a story yesterday in the papers I was talking about the fact that if high inflation rates, will dig a black hole into insurance pots and the likes. But I think I remember there used to be a triple lock system for pensions. No, I said insurance. I keep saying insurance. Pensions, I should say. So there was a story about inflation digging deep into the pensions in the UK, having a shortfall. But I know there used to be a triple lock system. So how is that triple lock system hedging against inflationary pressures, and who is paying up the rebate cost as a result of that?
Well, there is a triple lock on pensions, and that's still going. The fact of it is that pensions probably locked into rising with the retail price index. That's what the triple lock is. Whether that will continue, whether they will get more expensive, I suspect that will be subject to an enormous amount of debate, if that's what your question's leading to. What was the other question was about
Australia bopped up interest rate yesterday.
No, I don't think the Fed will have been worried about Australia at all. I think that Australia has actually joined the club, raising interest rates for the first time for 11 years, as we reported yesterday. I don't think it's got any kind of impact on what the Fed's decision is going to do, because they're very, very different economies in different parts of the world, quite honestly. And I think that the United States has to do something, and it's got nothing to do with the Royal Bank of Australia at all. It's got to do with its own domestic policies, which and apparently, I was saying this a couple of days ago, wasn't I, that Warren Buffett and leading American investors are now praising Jay Powell for his stance as far as the federal banks the Fed's concerned.
Well, let me take you back to the profits declared by British Petroleum. Almost about $4 billion dollars surplus. The expectation was 2.4. It ended up declaring about 6.2. Tomorrow, Shell is going to come up with its own profit report for the first quarter. And the expectation is that, Shell is also going to get a lot of windfall. And it's on the basis of that Lord Sarkestama and others are saying, look, people are making unexpected profits. There should be a tax, on that. After all, in Italy has increased its tax on energy profits from 10% to about 15% now. But the Prime Minister, the Business Secretary, and the Chancellor are saying that if this were to be done in the UK, in Britain, that this would discourage investments. Do you agree? And is BP promising £18 billion of investments over a decade, a period of about a decade? Would that stave off, this controversy over windfall tax?
Okay, so let me take you back to a very significant date, April the 20th, 2020. Do you remember what the oil price was on April the 20th, 2020? Let me refresh your memory. It went into negativity. In other words, oil companies were paying their customers to take oil from them. That's how volatile the price of oil is. And that will be the basis of the argument that the big oil companies will have against a windfall tax. What they will say is, yes, these are unearned, fortunate profits, but we have to explore. We have to, oil is a very, very long-term investment kind of business. And I feel as though politicians calling for windfall taxes are sort of doing it with a very strong eye on their constituents rather than the real, rather unpleasant world of oil, which is this, that the majority of oil now being brought out of the ground, and let's not kid ourselves that fossil fuels are going to disappear overnight, because they won't, are being done in countries that are being done with deals, are being done in countries that you really don't want to know about. You don't want to get your hands dirty and knowing about these kind of things. So my point is very simple: extreme volatility in the oil price, which we have just seen. And let me take you back, remember that date, April the 20th, 2020, the producers were actually paying their customers to take the oil off their hands, right? That's how volatile the industry is, and that's what the excuse from the oil companies will be. So it doesn't. I don't really think it makes a great deal of difference. There may be a windfall tax, but it bears no relation to what's actually happening, and it bears no. And I'm not saying this in defence of the oil companies. I'm just saying that is a fact of life. It's a dirty, dangerous business, and it's all right for politicians to disregard that, which of course they will do when they're playing at home, as Sir Keir Starmer is doing.
I am also not saying it in defense of BP, but didn't they also post losses running into billions of dollars over their withdrawal from Russia? So you're completely right about that volatility. But I wanted to link the Starbucks story while we have the chance to talk about Howard Schultz as CEO, since it's a short stint. Link that to a story that you had yesterday about Amazon and this issue of to unionize or not to unionize. Howard Schultz has launched this package, $200 million package for increased wages, training, benefits, and what have you for employees, added to one that was launched last year, $1 billion. Similar package for all Starbucks workers who have worked there for more than 2 years, apart from those who have joined a union or are petitioning to join a union. Is this blackmail? Is this a violation of labor laws? Can he get away with that?
Well, they can get away with it simply because they're an international company, and I don't know the ins and outs of international law, but I'm guessing that they've actually run this past their lawyers, and the lawyers are saying you can get away with what you want, basically, as far as China is concerned. I don't know. I think it would be very, very different in London. This sort of taxation, it's not quite a gig economy, is it? But and there is supposed to be a career for people within companies like Starbucks and McDonald's and Amazon and so on. I would say, and again I'm guessing, that they'll be labour intensive, pretty low skilled jobs as it goes. So Starbucks would not be my destination, as it were, for my children, if you want to put it like that. I'd prefer them to be joining something with more executive prospects rather than just filling up expensive cups of coffee or whatever they call the brown liquid that costs nearly £5 in London.
I'd rather you're a Costa man anyway, Michael.
Do you know what? I'm a flask man. I make my own at home and take it with me. I'm sorry, but to pay £4 or £5 for a cup of mass-produced coffee, no thank you.
And pretentiously named mass-produced coffee. Well, thank you,
Correct.
Mr. Wilson. Now, our dependable Rotus Adiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Tundu, Rufai, and Doctor. We begin with some fertilizer. So apparently, Omo-Agege, who is the head of the NSIA, Sovereign Investment Authority, confirmed that Nigeria panic bought Canadian potash in April. Potash is a fertilizer that is used for plant nutrients. That's part of the big three, along with phosphorus and nitrogen. And apparently, because of the inability to get potash from Russia, Nigeria apparently had to get it from Canada. If we take a look at the top global producers, Canada is number one as far as data from 2020 is. Okay, no, actually, before we even get to that, let me get to the export limits. Remember, we talked about this 2 days ago. We talked about the food prices and so on climbing as a result of nations limiting exports. And you can see there, Russia, fertilizer, sugar, and grains. So this now pretty much confirms, the fact that our inability to get potash from them is why we went over to Canada. In fact, by the way, I hear potash is used as a tenderizer for ugba in the southeast, which is supposed to be like the African salad or something. I'm on good authority. Yeah, I heard about that. All right, let's take a look at the global producers of potash. So in million metric tons, Canada is number one, followed by Russia and Belarus. Belarus and then China. The four of them account for about, I think, 80% of global supply. So only able to get from Russia, we had to head on over to Canada. So this, I guess, underscores the challenges and the negative impacts of the supply-induced shortages from this war in Ukraine. Antonio Guterres is in Nigeria as we speak, right? He was in, I think, Borno yesterday or Maiduguri, speaking with the governor there, talking about the issues that we've been facing. So this now brings into the fore the Dangote fertilizer plant. Remember, we talked about the flat plants when it was commissioned. There is, of course, something to point out here in that the phase one capacity is 3 million metric tons of urea. Urea, ammonia, that's completely, you can use them on plants, but that's different. That's different from potash, because that's ammonia. But there are expansion plans to produce more fertilizer grades, which means perhaps the Dangote fertilizer plant can get in there as far as potash is concerned. However, you're not going to replace the kind of volumes that you're looking for from other nations. But still, this, of course, is part of the narrative of us looking inwards. From Nigeria, we go to, I believe, to Ghana. John Mahama, who was former president and head of the opposition party, is saying that Ghana is facing a debt default. In fact, it says it's going to happen unless something drastic is done. If we take a look at some of the figures, Ghana's got some alarm bells with respect to its fiscal structure. So I think as far as public debt is concerned, 351 billion cedis, 76% of GDP as at the end of last year, up from 74% of GDP in 2020 was 291 billion cedis. Debt service costs have risen fivefold since 2016. Now, you can say Mr. Mahama has, I guess, sour grapes from the last election and so on and so forth. But I guess he does bring up a point that has been brought about, that has been raised several times. Of course, Ghana has passed their e-levy bill, which is projected to bring in more revenue for the nation. But is it going to make up for the fiscal impediments that the country is facing? That's to be seen. But, Ghana is right up there. And again, Ghana is not immune from the issues that we are facing, that everybody else is facing, with the shortage of imports from other countries that are restricting them for themselves due to protectionist measures. Finally, Libya, not too much of a surprise here. Export data, oil exports, they're at an 18-month low. We all know Libya's problems since Gaddafi left power. When I say left power, was forced out of power. In 2011, there's been one issue after another. There's been protests. There's been attacks on oil facilities. There's been force majeures. There's been, it's just so, so Libya, facing a number of issues as far as oil exports are concerned. And they badly, and when I say badly need the revenue for their own issues, but yeah.
All right, so let's dig into it. So potash is really very important. Why? Because you need for fertilizer. And most of the fertilizer you have here are pretty much NPK based, and depending on the variety of the crops we plant. And potash pretty much, helps the growth of the crop. It's not like your urea-based fertilizer, right, that all it just does is fixes nitrogen. So potash is like a soluble form of potassium. So it fixes potassium into the soil. So that's what kicks the plant off the ground in the first place. And that's why when you see most of the fertilizer blend, you could have NPK and the likes, nitrogen, potassium, and
phosphorus, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
So we have to get this from Canada now because something's happening in Russia and there's a big brouhaha. And the company that really churns this out of Russia, Eurochem, which is owned by a guy called Dmitry Mazepan. Funny enough, his son is a Formula One driver, drives for Haas, Nikita Mazepan.
Okay.
So, and he's also part of Putin's kitchen cabinet. And because of that, all the sanctions have, shut Eurochem down. So we need to go to Canada. But the question is the equalization of costs. Because we've got pre-existing contracts with Eurochem.
Yep.
And what's going to be the cost threshold that is going to come in? Because you definitely need it, for the fertilizer milling plants like the Indorama's of this world and the likes. The question is, maybe long-term, Dangote Refinery can kick in and produce this, but what they're doing majorly now is urea. And like I said, urea will be, for the booming of crops, pretty much a fixed nitrogen in the soil and the likes and things like that. It will take some time to kick in. So there's some possibility for that, but the question is, it might not come in now. Concerning Ghana, Ghana's always had this big problem of debt, really. I think there was a movement called the Jubilee Movement pushing for forgiveness of African debt.
That's not going to happen.
In the early 2000s. That was early 2000s.
Okay, I thought you meant now.
And Ghana's debt was slashed in half.
Yeah.
But the funny thing, after Ghana's debt was slashed in half, about 5-10 years later, Ghana mounted the debt up all over again.
It's like also the Paris Club.
Yeah, and that's what is happening now. It's about 84%. And I think, in all honesty, Nana Akufo-Addo has mismanaged the economy. Some of the things that plunged Ghana in this debt, number one, they banked too much on their fields to provide crude oil for them, but those didn't come through. In fact, production in those Ghanaian petroleum fields dropped because of COVID from about 195,000 barrels per day to about 150,000 barrels per day. They had a lot of banking reforms where a lot of the microfinance banks and the like were shut down, and the Ghanaian government had to pay people, the indemnities from the shutdown of the banks. So they wasted a lot of money as regards that. And they've not been able to capture effectively their informal sector. And now that's why they're putting that e-levy thing, at least to be able to get some payment in and the likes.
Yeah.
And when you look at it, the predominant problem is the Ghanaian economy is just export-driven. As with other African countries, they don't refine products.
Yeah.
And once you don't do that, you can't compete effectively. So Ghana is in dire straits with galloping inflation at 19.4%. Then they can't pay their debts. And it's chitty bang all over again.
But would you say
I'm so sorry. I just need one quick point I forgot to mention. The Omo-Agege was asked about how much we paid for the potash from Canada. He didn't give price.
He paid a lot for it. He can't talk.
The spot price is up 250%.
I know.
So as far as the fiscal impact of that is more expensive.
I kind of figure that. But Ghana, I get your point, but I thought any kind of cleanup of financial sectors is a good thing.
Yes,
and paying back customers. I know they had to borrow $3 billion.
Right, to do it. That's the thing. It costs a lot of money.
Yeah, they borrowed $3 billion. But they had to pay the depositors.
It costs a lot,
Correct, affirmative.
They're paying for it now.
Who pays back the money to them?
I don't want to think that President Mahama is just expressing sour grapes.
Right.
He may have lost the last presidential elections, but he's preparing for the 2024 elections.
He is.
And the National Democratic Congress, the NDC in Ghana, they are hoping they will take out, Akufo-Addo and his own people.
Yeah.
Yes, what we see here, if you look at the story, it sounds like the Nigerian story as well. The fact that debt is very high, and the little revenue that Ghana gets, once they service the debt and they pay wages, there is nothing left. And the key point made by Mahama is that, Ghana is facing the prospect of a default on its sovereign debt. And we have seen what that has done in Argentina, what it did to them in Lebanon, and the crisis that they are facing currently in Sri Lanka. So when many countries find themselves in that kind of situation, they go and borrow more. So the situation is further complicated. But what I like about, John Mahama's intervention, and that's why I said, well, I don't think it's our grapes. One, he dismissed the e-levy, the levy on electronic payments, which the Minister of Finance had told us last year. We addressed the problem of budget deficit in Ghana, and he says, no, that cannot work. And he had concrete suggestions. Whether the Akufo-Addo administration will accept his suggestions or not is another thing. He says, for example, that they should reduce the size of government, sack the ministers, okay? Look for more creative measures. But I doubt if, the sitting administration will listen to that from the opposition. But the good thing, of course, is that the risks they face in Ghana with inflation rate of about 19.4% and all these debt service to GDP ratio issues. We face the same issues here. But in Nigeria here, what you hear all the time is that our problem is revenue. It is not the debt. Okay, they have a similar situation. And the opposition leader, former President Mahama, is saying that, look, even the taxes that are collected, those taxes are used to promote and fund inefficiency. And I think that, those are very strong points. As for Nigeria going to buy potash from Canada, well, isn't it the fact that as a result of the war in Ukraine and other global disruptions, every country, more or less, is facing very large negative shocks, as the IMF pointed out last week or so. Take the countries in Europe. Italy, Spain, they've had to come towards Africa to get gas supplies, right? In some other countries, they are more or less helpless. Ukraine produces sunflower, right? Russia, apart from being the gas station of the world, produces wheat. In the UK, they are complaining about the cost of living prices. It's connected. In Africa here, the cost of a loaf of bread has gone up. So all this is about this interconnectedness, but in the case of Nigeria, what we should know, or even elsewhere, is low fertilizer access will lead to low agricultural yield. That
is correct.
And that the Nigerian government needed to be concerned because this is an administration that has been talking about its focus on agriculture. Yep. When the Dangote fertilizer plant was, commissioned more or less, in March, right? The point that was made by the governor of the central bank is how this administration has focused heavily on providing fertilizer. That from about 7 or so fertilizer plants, that we now have 42 across the country. But during the COVID, there were issues, even with the production of urea. Ndorama had to shut down. They had to lay off staff. Okay, so it's good to see that the NSIA, the Sovereign Investment Authority, has stepped in here ahead of the planting season. I hope the potash, 3 cargoes of it, would arrive before the planting season, and that it will be put to good use. Right. Because there have been issues, so many issues with fertilizer production, that President Buhari had to set up the Presidential Fertilizer Initiative, led by Governor Bagudo. And part of the issues they had to deal with MPK in this regard was with hoarding. In fact, the federal government even had to set up a task force. So provision, availability of raw materials for blending and production is one thing. There are bigger issues of logistics and of corruption within the fertilizer subsector in Nigeria. And those are things that we'll probably have to worry about beyond, getting supplies from elsewhere.
But Dr. Abati, those issues of logistics, I thought we solved those problems under Omo-Agege with the e-wallet thing that made fertilizer logistics effective.
Those problems are
bad now. How do you transport them?
Problems are bad.
It's problems that there is just transportation networks and so on. So it's a huge issue.
Anyway, thank you, Lotus.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Rufai was admiring your tie. I'm taking it closely. I see that it's very sharp. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.